Listen. This is my grandfather playing his own music over 100 years ago. His name was Gustav Mahler. Since then, the world has changed beyond his wildest imagination. But people are still the same. We live, we love, we dream, we die. We still ask ourselves, who are we? Why are we here? Where will we go after we die? These questions resonate in my grandfather's music. Everyone can understand his music because it embraces past, present, and future, the human condition between birth and death, and beyond. He composed for people of his own time, but also for us and those of the future. A symphony, he said, must be like the world. It must contain everything. And this is how my grandfather wrote his music. Welcome to his universe. Welcome to the world of Gustav Mahler. Describing the world in sound is mystical from beginning to end, writes my grandfather. He can testify to that in more than one way. In the Viennese court opera, he conducts the masterpieces of great composers, and here, in Mayanik, during the summer, he writes music himself. Through his songs and symphonies, he seeks to understand life and explain it to himself and to others.
There's always a story. There's always a reason that he's composed something in a certain way. I don't think it's, there's nothing haphazard or coincidental in his music.
And the essence of that is this idea of love, empathy, awareness, compassion, engagement. Live life now. It's like what Joseph Campbell said so brilliantly many years ago, the philosopher, mythologist in America. It's not so much about understanding the meaning of life. It's whether you grasped the meaning in life.
My grandfather is not afraid to share his doubts, his victories, and his defeats. In his first 4 symphonies, he raises philosophical and religious questions about love, death, heaven and hell, or the mysterious beauty of nature. But in the 5th symphony, my grandfather changes his tone of voice.
The 5th Symphony comes after an important moment in his life where Mahler nearly dies with a hemorrhage.
And he's just gotten up off of an operating table where the doctor said, don't kid yourself. You were on the other side. I brought you back. I don't need to be thanked, but that's what we do as doctors. You were dead. We were lucky. You good? You know, I mean, you can imagine this conversation.
One doesn't want to make too close a correspondence, but there does seem to be a break between the 4th Symphony and the 5th at a moment when he is facing these life's crises. And the 5th truly is a new direction for him in terms of what he's trying to accomplish in his instrumentation and what these symphonies look and feel like.
In the streets of Vienna, during the first years of the 20th century, my grandfather is a famous figure. As conductor of the court opera, Mahler is the emperor of music. Movie stars and sports heroes have not yet risen to stardom. Although in France, the first science fiction film is made, A Trip to the Moon, musicians are still worshipped. Tenor Enrico Caruso makes a million-selling record. And also admired are the great discoverers, like Robert Falcon Scott, who explores the South Pole. But in 1901, in his composing hut in Meijernig, fame is the least of Mahler's concerns. My grandfather is trying to turn a personal crisis into a symphony.
With this Fifth Symphony, it's really that the human who has gone through all these turmoil, the human who is imperfect, who is no God, who is no angel, then goes through a kind of transformation, and then through love emerges as the victor.
The hero journey, I think, is elemental to all of Mahler. The getting back up and trying again. The insatiable, unbreakable belief in the rightness of being alive.
Where does the trumpet come from? Who's announcing it? Is it death? Is it fate? What is catching up with us here? I think we can find many terms for it, but it's certainly a problematic way to begin a symphony. And he sets a high bar, because now we have to work our way through this and somehow, as we know with Mahler, at least in most symphonies, try to reach a higher place.
You don't get to just sit back and listen to that. You're demanded to be whatever this journey is going to be. And then once again, here we are, internal or external world, back into the march.
My grandfather compares his symphonies with the journey of a hero. In the funeral march of the Fifth, this hero says goodbye to the life he has known. He looks for new inspiration.
So what is the marches, what is this march thing with Mahler? I tend to immediately identify most of these marching themes as the inevitability of life.
This is the opening, and this is when we see everything for the first time. But then the melody and the strings after that I think for me is the real beginning of the movement. If you're able to create an extreme contrast between the trumpet fanfare and that, you know, that this is the external part of the tragedy with the fanfare, and then the internal part, the real pain comes after.
In the second movement, it's so much more stormier.
It takes us into a tumultuous exploration of again, themes that seem to be in conflict with one another. And over the course of the symphony, we find a way to resolve the question of death and the fear of death.
There was so much that he was taking into himself and going so deeply into it. I could understand so easily how he would just have to sigh and breathe out and think that this is more than a person can bear.
The scherzo is this changing point in the symphony, because you have the first, second movement being so dramatic and so negative in some ways, and full of turmoil. And then the third movement, you have pop 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 pop. It's like a ray of sunshine.
These famous changes of mood have to make sense. That if he's suddenly in a slower tempo, the music does not only get slower, but it's also suddenly maybe weightless. It can be sometimes fast and going forward, but then there are also these moments when it just suddenly dances very, very gracefully.
And then love strikes. Of course, my grandfather, 41 at that time, has had his share of affairs. But in the fall of 1901, he meets a 22-year-old girl who will become the love of his life, my grandmother, Alma Schindler. The next year, they marry in Vienna's Karlskirche. And shortly after he finishes the Fifth Symphony, she gives birth to their first daughter, Maria.
So Mahler is working on pieces in the summer of 1901, as he always is. He's trying to think about a new symphony, and he's conceiving these movements, some of which will become the Fifth Symphony. That fall, he meets Alma at a soiree. This young woman sitting opposite him, who has a very high opinion of herself and of her own opinions, is very beautiful, very intelligent, and not at all afraid of his presence and his reputation.
She was very highly spirited. She had her own inner weight, and that's also what must have attracted him. She was not only beautiful, but she had a weighty soul, I would say, even though in relation to his, it was lighter. But I understand the attraction, and he had not that much time. It was an instinctive, it was a falling in love, it was a sort of recognition. But her world was a musical world as well.
I think he was so thrilled that he could love, you know? He was a passionate man. And Alma was as much an idyllic release of that love thing that we all need and have as a person, as much as it was this amazing human being that he was in love with.
Alma was really a muse, and has been a muse not only for Mahler, but for many men before and after him. And so she had this capacity to inspire men and to inspire love, great love. And Mahler was deeply in love with Alma. And Mengelberg said that the Adagietto of the Fifth Symphony was a declaration of love to Alma.
That's very beautiful. That almost seemed like two people finding each other, and almost like their souls connected and falling in love all over again.
In the beginning of the Adagietto, just the arpeggiating harp, and the beginning of the first theme of the violins that handed off, and not even directly, but already through some sort of pastel coordination, and it ends up in the cello sections. I mean, it's just so beautiful.
It's deceptively simple, but there's no deception about the content of the music, of the mood, of what it's meant to convey. And it's, again, you know, just a very direct, pure love.
So, halfway through the composition of the Fifth Symphony, Alma Schindler comes into my grandfather's life. She inspires him to write the Adagietto. The desperate hero of the first two movements finally finds salvation in love. What does love mean to people these days?
What is love?
Love is just kind of a sensation or a feeling that you get when you feel a special connection with somebody.
For me, true love is caring about people, about an individual. And I think the everyday representation of that love is in the details that you think about toward the other person. And it's giving. Love is about giving and helping.
To describe it is to limit it. So I could not, I can't describe it. It's just like that, keeps growing.
I think what is really masterful about the finale is that it starts right after this heavenly cloud of love. We are in the silence again, and you know, maybe the blissful sleep or whatever, and then there's this note from the horn.
By pouring his heart into this music, he not only sets up the Adagietto, but he uses that theme as the finale theme. He changes it, he speeds it up, he increases the orchestration of it, but it's as if love is what triumphs in this piece, quite literally. So he gives us the beautiful melody in the fourth, but he transforms it as the triumphal closure of the whole Fifth Symphony.
The kind of joy that he's expressing at the end of the fifth movement, it's undescribable. It's just, you know, beyond. It's like fireworks in the whole universe.
So in a way, the symphony is about love, is about the triumph of love over all these other existential questions that are asked.
If we can have that, and we can have this music, we will be okay. We'll be all right. We will make it as a species.